Hi guys, welcome. So today we're going to carry on with the same basic idea as what we started last week, but a lot simpler. So last week we had the dog, we were painting in color, and some people commented that the dog itself was a little bit complicated as there were a lot of shapes. So Christine suggested we could draw her cat. So I've made a little lesson, it goes something like this, and I've given some people this, but I'm going to stick it on to the video as well, so you can have PDF or something, or a picture you can download if you want. So this is Christine's cat. You can see it's a lot less complicated. There's not arms and legs and whatever sticking out everywhere. We're going to go through it and break it down into simple shapes, and then we're going to also investigate how we can draw the cat. So originally this lesson was also a painting lesson, so that was the painting of the cat. And then this is what we're going to do today. Since you don't need so many materials, just a pencil and an eraser to draw the basic forms and then work on some texture. Okay, so let's get started. So this is our reference photo of a cat. We're going to draw this in black and white. But in this example, we're showing it in paint, but you can start with your own pencils since we're in a cafe and can't really just paint in the cafe. So we're starting off with the basic shapes. So you'll notice I've replaced this barrel shape of the belly with barrel shape here. The head, the closest shape I can get is a circle, and the ear, a triangle. Now, this is not the final shapes, but it's just going to give you a map of getting the cat shape as we go along. So then we've got a little bit of a scoop out of that circle, a little bit of a triangle, and we start to get the sense of a head, a bit of a contour. We've coloured in the barrel shape and the circle and the triangle, and we've added a few more shapes here for the ruffles for the neck. Just a mid-tone grey, nothing special. So you can see it's not a very big jump from here to here. We just look again at the shape of our cat. We follow the contours. We think about the ruffles of the fur, and we bring a few of those contours in, and we use the original drawing as a kind of a map. What we're going to do from there is try to make it look a bit 3D. So we have to sort of think again about our light source and also think of the cat as a kind of three-dimensional object that's got volume. So when something's got volume, you're going to have light on one side coming across, and then probably shade down the bottom and over one side. So what we do, it's a bit complicated when you've got a lot of texture, so we break it down a bit, and we just go back to those basic shapes, thinking the light's coming from one side, and then a bit of light in the middle, there's more grey tones, and coming over to the bottom of the objects, of the circles, we're going to find there's a lot more shade down the bottom of those. Now when we introduce the idea of the contour again, like the fluffy shapes, the contour of the cat's body, even though this one's a little bit more like a beanbag shape than the original, we will find that this still holds true. We've still got the light on one side, and we've got the shade on the other side. The only thing we're missing now is we don't really have the sense of texture, and that's where a little bit of technique is going to come in, brushing in texture. But even when this might look a little bit complicated, I've used a paintbrush in this case, but here we can use a pencil and get just the same effect. All we really need is to keep the lights on one side. It's interrupted a little bit by some light shadows. When we come into here, we've got some, in the middle part, we've got some darker shadows, and also the highlights are a little bit darker. Even the highlights are a bit grey. Over on the far side, the highlights are very dark, and the shadows are extremely dark, going into black. So you can see how the tones match up really. So in the middle, we've got middle tones, and we've got darks, middle tones and darks. On the far side, we've got darks. On the far side, we've got darks. On the light side, we've really just got lights and a few light tones, lights and just light tones here too. So that's basically it. Now we can stop and we'll have a look at how to do this with our pencil. So the same as the first step in the painting example, start off with the basic shapes. This time I'm just going to go straight to chopping out that little divot in the circle. There's a triangle for the ear, the circle for the head, another triangle for the other ear, and again a little triangle there. similar sort of barrel shape as we drew in the original, and then those little shapes that fill in the neck. I'm also going to go straight to the shading part. So you build up the shade the same way as we did before in the example with the painting. Maybe don't go too dark too fast, just keep it. But you'll notice that the shading is pretty dark around the inner neck, but it's on the main forms, the two big circular forms, except for the triangles that poke up, those are the ears. But shading around the bottom, letting it get lighter, and in this case I'm using a 2B pencil, which is a kind of like a middle to dark kind of pencil, and slowly I'm building it up. So just like on the example, we've got dark on one side and then light on the other. Pencil, we're going to go with erasing a bit of it, so we don't want it to get, instead of painting over it, so we don't want it to get too dark too soon. But at the same time, we don't want it to have no contrast either, so we'll make it relatively sort of clear, but without overdoing it. And gradually I'm building up to lighter and lighter tones. I'm going to grab a slightly lighter pencil now, going to the HB, and notice I'm using the side of my pencil. I'm just going to pause for it. So yeah, you'll notice it's pretty dark on one side and then pretty light on the other side. What we can do sometimes is use one of these little things. It's a smudging tool. I'm just going to smudge a fair bit of that tone over this side, makes things a little bit quicker. And then you can see that we're pretty similar to what we did in the original painting, going from dark to light, dark to light. Okay. Now here I'm starting to draw in some of the contours. I'm kind of looking at the way that the fur has these like ridges in it across the back, building up. Notice that my pencil's going mostly one direction at a time, and I'm following those little shapes, and I'm looking for the shapes of the lights, and I'm shading around them where there's a light, which shows the highlight of the fur, shading under the fur, and I'm just building it up slowly. You don't want to go too fast. Maybe even just go with a lighter pencil, especially in the lighter bits. You can sort of just really gently build it up, not too quickly. And when you get to a certain point with that, maybe I'm going a bit too fast for the sake of the demonstration, a bit too heavy-handed, but when you get to a certain point with that sort of stuff, what you can do is come back with your little smudging tool and smudge it all back in again, and you're going to lose a lot of the detail. But you can notice it sort of softens the fur back into the body, and it looks a little bit more natural. As you go along, you have a chance to look at the actual contours of the cat, and you notice, oh, okay, down here there's a bit of a hip shape that's coming out, and it doesn't really have a line on it, so I don't want to draw a line, but it's got some shading that makes it more visible. And follow from the skin outwards with the hairs, from the skin, and then it's sort of, you can lift up your pencil towards the end. You can also shade back in the other way if you want to, but so just keep on going and building up the tones and the ridges on the cat until you're pretty happy. And you might find at some point it gets all a little bit too dark. That's okay. You can always come back with your eraser and erase out the highlights. You also want to make sure that you get a nice, deep, sort of decisive shadow in some parts that are, you know, pretty black or pretty dark. Some parts you're going to lose a bit of the shadow or a bit of the detail in the shadow. That's quite a nice effect though, having some bits that are not so clear but deep and dark with mysterious little highlights in there. You'll notice you can get right in to the fur, right into those ridges there, and then still starting at the skin and then coming out with the fur. And you don't want to paint it or draw every hair, but occasionally you'll just pick out a detail or something like that. I'm doing this upside down, so maybe my detail's not perfect, but also the next thing we can do is a very similar thing. Now we've got a fair bit of darks, we can also work with the highlights. So just be aware that not too many highlights in the dark bits, a lot more highlights, and a few flyaway hairs happening. Gives a bit more randomness and whatever, but still keeping to the idea that the hairs are basically in clumps and you want to follow the clump shape more than anything else, that the lights are mostly on one side and not so much on the other side. So even though we get a bit of highlights coming across the body, essentially you want to keep the sense of highlight on one side more than another side. I haven't got much highlights on the head at the moment, so I want to come back and reassert the highlights, but also try and keep the texture going on a little bit there. So little bit by little bit, our cat starts to look more and more fluffy. If the lines are too, a little bit too harsh again, come back with the same process. Just, you don't always have to smudge it a lot, but smudge it a little bit sometimes if the lines are too obviously artificial or not looking natural enough. And then just it's a little bit of a push and pull between the contrast and the blending in. Hope you've enjoyed the lesson, and yeah, we'll see you next time.